So I think we can start with the questions on the talks we had before from Professor Magnani, Professor Lombo, Marcus, and Anna. So if you have any problem, any question, I would be curious to her. Thank you.
Well, Michelini raised his hand, so maybe there is this mark of the hand.
I have a question for you
Okay.
about collective society versus individuals forming into groups and having habits and how to change these habits, if I understand correctly. So essentially a group of individuals forming into a society are actually a complex adaptive system who are acting with the self-interest, but trying to optimize their own local interests while they're participating in the group. So the complex self-adaptive systems have evolved over, the theory of complex adaptive systems has been evolving for quite a while. However, the important difference between biological systems and the complex adaptive systems is that the biological systems actually have developed an overlay architecture that actually looks at global optimization versus just individual local optimization. And so in terms of forming habits, this has to be taken into account because it cannot happen by itself. For example, if you take the example of Mumbai and Berlin, and Bombay and Berlin, why those two things are so different. However, the risk-reward ratio is very different. The risk patterns and reward patterns are very different in these two. And the local entropy of these two configurations is quite different. And so in order to address this issue of global optimization versus local optimization, conflict of interest, and also the finiteness of resources, how to mediate between contending parties, all of this stuff becomes very important. And that is what forces, in my view, actually a habit change. And so unless you address this higher level global optimization and address local constraints and also provide local autonomy, because if you take away local autonomy, people will be very pissed off and leave, right? And so you have to essentially balance these two. And that's what the biological systems have done. And I think we need to learn from that and develop patterns. Yeah, I want your opinion on that because I'm working on very similar kind of architecture where you can essentially go from complex adaptive systems that are locally consistent. They have very good logic locally, but they're not moved to the external reality. So you have this problem of Gödel, which says self-referential circularity not moved to external reality, causing problems. And that's what needs to be addressed.
Now it is for me the question because you talking, and so I think maybe Mattias' paper. Okay. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, I can hear you. I can read your paper, but go ahead.
Okay, yes. No, I just propose a model. I know the issues are very complex. So when you have habit are bad stuff. Okay, there is a
Thank you. I think maybe we
freedom,
can take it
obviously,
offline. We can take it offline and discuss, and I can also read more about your papers. Thanks.
I think that Matthias was speaking, but Matthias, we couldn't hear you.
Yes, I was. I just forgot to get
Okay.
my microphone in order. So thank you very much.
There you go.
Yes.
Yeah.
I mean, I can just I think you're right that there is this problem of let's say self-interest, and then if you want to optimize the system on a more global scale, which goes beyond the individual, then there arise problems of coordination and yeah, to address them would really, I guess, improve in let's say an approach that relates to habits. Although I mean, you can of course talk about collective intentionality in terms of collective action, so that a group decides to do something together, and then you don't have the problems of coordination to such an extent because people share a common intention that at least somehow coordinates their behavior. But of course, if you don't have this shared intention, and it's more that people coordinate in a complex system with one another, I think that you are right that other considerations have to be added in order to make sense of it. I think then a habit theory, yeah, might have to be complemented by literature on coordination problems and game theory and how this then would work out.
Actually, you are right on target, because that is exactly what the structural machines theory is trying to address. Basically, that's what the neocortex does in the brain. It essentially provides this, and also contention for resources and reorganizing the resources where they are required. For example, yesterday there was a talk about how when a lion starts to chase you, how you have to immediately change your behavior. In order to do that, you have to reassign your priorities and also resources and so on, right? And so the neocortex, exactly the function of neocortex is to do that. And by understanding this cognitive behavior and how it actually addresses with the overlay architecture, globally optimizes all the local contentions that are coming from, and also coordinating across your multiple domains, visual information, oral information, all of that stuff which is coming, and they may be in conflict. And so somebody has to resolve all of those, right? And so the self-regulation mechanism has to be implemented. So your habits theory also has to address how you can develop such a self-regulating higher order overlay architecture. And I think general theory of information by Professor Bergen provides you a mechanism to do that in a very mathematical way. So you don't have to go and have this phenomenological stuff, exactly like thermodynamics was phenomenological, whereas statistical mechanics address the function, structure, and fluctuations, and therefore gave a theory that essentially explained how the macroscopic properties are related to the microscopic behaviors. And I think everybody, classical computer scientists, if they start looking at these kinds of issues from a structural point of view and read the general theory of information, I think we'll have a much better advance of science than this phenomenological approach that has classical computer science has been projecting. For example, Gödel's theorem of self-referential circularity, not moved to external reality. For example, if you read Life After Google, he explains actually, George Gilder explains the real issues that come from this kind of thing. And this is what causes, for example, conflict between communism and capitalism, or socialism and freedom, blah, blah, blah. But if you really address this with, that is also because there is a fundamental problem with logic, that is, each logic can be consistent, but if it is not moved to external reality, multiple logics may be inconsistent with respect to each other. And so you need a higher level logic that is going to address these lower level inconsistencies. And that is the missing part. And the general theory of information essentially addresses how to go about that. And so you go from Turing machines to structural machines, you go from data structures to knowledge structures, and from consciousness to culture.
It does seem. Are you hearing me?
Yes,
Can anyone hear me?
we can hear you, yeah.
It does seem that the discussion on habit, the scope is seem restricted. It seem not enough space, because I have not listened to anyone talking about what makes a habit good and what makes a habit bad. These distinctions are very necessary, because when you are talking about habit, character formation, other stuff, you need to make a distinction between good, bad. And it does appear we are forgetting about, well, I'm afraid we don't like to hear the word morals, but I'm sorry, I have to use it. So what is the morality of these habitus? How do we explain it in relation to our action? Because by the last speaker talking about doings, public, or what you may call an institutionalized terms. What makes this institution good and what makes it bad? Who decides? Is it collective or is it individual? Is a general observation. And Romano, thank you.
Romano, I agree with you. I don't think that game theory mathematical model can solve, can relieve individual this. Can be a projection and several and I am a sociologist, so I use the statistics that is to behave and what we can control or not control, what we do. So I think that rational choice is not. No,
Can I
sociology was really terrible.
You're breaking up again.
Collective intentionality is better than game theory.
Can I answer this? Can I answer this?
Yeah.
Okay. So essentially, it has to be a self-regulatory mechanism that has to evolve from individual groups, right? And so each individual participating and each individual group participating in this collective society as a hierarchy or whatever, they all will have self-interest. However, everybody likes to be fair, and the fairness is what everybody wants. And if a society starts to develop a collective scheme which is fair to everyone, then everybody will accept willingly and they participate willingly. So I think you need some guiding principles that will allow the participants to self-regulate and participate in the global organization willingly, not by force or because the local logics are inconsistent, maybe with respect to each other at the higher level. And so fairness essentially then makes these people come together and work together. Otherwise, it will cause a lot of other problems. And so I think fairness is a good criteria, and everybody has to accept. And so democracy and democratization allow democracy to create self-regulating constraints at a global level, right? And that's why the United States Constitution works so well. And that's my 2 cents, by the way.
So maybe
and that depends on who decides what is fair. In this
May
context,
I-
who is to
That is the
decide?
democracy, right? That is democracy. For
Then,
90%
if
of the
it is
people.
democracy, wait,
Magnani.
no,
May
Sorry.
I add?
Okay. Professor Magnani.
Yes, I wanted to address this important problem of bad and good habits. So first of all, my observation is related to the fact that you have to consider a perspective about habits. So a habit that is good for a collective of human beings is considered bad when seen from the point of view of another collective of human beings. There are some habits in Western world that are considered good for us and are considered bad for other people that live in our planet. So when habit embed moral rules, moral perspectives, they can conflict and they can be seen bad in one perspective and good in another perspective. This is the problem. This is the problem not only of habits, but also of morality. After all, morality is structured thanks to habits, okay? But you know that, for instance, inside the collective, there are some people that do not follow the moral rules. They consider the moral rules bad, and usually they are punished, okay? But they do not like the moral rules. They are punished. So there is the problem inside the moral collective of this interplay between bad and good, and there is the problem of the of other collective, other perspective that see bad what we see good. It is patent. It is evident. Consider, for instance, the recent story of terrorism, and in Western world, terrorism was performed by people that considered many of the Western habits absolutely bad habits, the same habits that we consider good. Thank you.
yeah, thank you for the information.
Excuse me?
I said thank you for your input.
Okay.
I can see that Anna is waiting a long time for having opportunity to say something.
Thank you. Thanks for noticing that. And thank you, Romano, for bringing up the moral sphere. Actually, I was already thinking on that when Raffaella was talking about daily habits and rituals. And so I did my doctoral work in the history of medieval Chinese philosophy and religion. And I couldn't help but to think of Confucius in this context. So that may be a little bit out of this discussion, but I think it's very relevant, is that Confucius institutionalized a ritual and created a moral code where daily practices in the family that was the core seed to the way that the ritual became institutionalized, and also the way that morals were taught more broadly. So the moral code is based on families and family ritual, and then this extends out into local interaction, and then even broader into national and political interaction. So everything can be whittled down in Confucian philosophy to how the family interacts. And I would just say that in the contemporary world, what we have seen is a complete degradation of the roles of family members and, the importance of the interaction within the family. And one could I do think several scholars are working on this who study Chinese philosophy, is looking at the way that, our roles within families and separation of children from parents, even people who live together, they just do not interact in a cohesive manner. And we have normalized that behavior, especially I'm in San Francisco, I'm in the United States, and we have institutionalized a way in which families are not meant to be together. We separate, mothers are expected to work very shortly after giving birth. They're not expected. In fact, if you do stay with your children, it is seen as somewhat abnormal and away from the collective understanding of what a mother is supposed to do. So I really think that, that looking at Confucianism and a comparative look here could be interesting. Rafaela, I was thinking of that with your talk, and I can send some stuff offline about it, but that looking in a comparative philosophy with Eastern, thought, it would be interesting about how daily practices in the family and then extended out into society impacts the institutionalization of, rituals.
Anna, thank you for your comment, because as I told from sociology, in sociology there is this distinction community society and mechanical solidarity, and in society solidarity, and there is a difference bit of action and system on the part of theory of action. Okay, micro theories of action, not system theory. I come from this I think that the institutionalized with practice of this is the is a problem that some from John to we create social and
Rafaela, sorry, maybe turn off camera, because again your voice is distorted. It's very difficult to understand.
Okay, so no, this is just because interested in practices that come from habits that can be individual and social. And I think that the theory of collective intentionality has a point, because it is biology, a human function that becomes social function, but he has a nice say on what is language, also starting from the biological dimension, categorical. So, but in my opinion, habit have an important role to reduce the complexity in device, but also they have this function to reduce complexity. Otherwise, we cannot live. So it's something that is very to stand and to analyze. Okay, I don't. I just wanted to ask to Lorenzo if this semiotization of rituals does not insulate human habits, because there is something that we have in common with animals. Also, animals have this habitual behavior, or in a different way, obviously. But do you think that rituals are insulating to understand all the complexity of rituals?
I do not. Romano is talking. St. Thomas Aquinas.
No, Lorenzo Magnani. My question for Lorenzo Magnani.
Okay.
Prof. Lorenzo.
Hey, Lorenzo, you are muted.
Yeah, Lorenzo, unmute your mic.
Sorry. This is my idea. We face a lot of habits. Some of them are completely devoid of any kind of relationship with language. For instance, instinctual habits that we share with animals, unconscious habits that not necessarily are related to language. And we have habits that are also biological, in the sense that the body of animals and of human beings and of vegetal present some stabilities, some behavior that we can call habits. The problem is that the typicality of human habits that are founded and built thanks to our natural languages that are complex languages, syntactic languages, are habits that are typical of human beings, because even if we can share habits with animals, it is really difficult to find some kinds of habits in animals that are so complicated, like the habits in human beings. It is not the problem of, for instance,
yes, no, I agree.
Animals too have some behaviors that we can call with a kind of anthropomorphization, a behavior of scapegoating. This is my idea, Raffaella. What do you think?
Okay. Yes, because I had the impression, but it is important because you emphasize also the moral and human do not have our moral, obviously. So, and it is also that maybe some animals dance, animals, maybe they die with dance, but the way in which it exists, the tea ceremony in the animal wood. So there are continuity and the discontinuities. So but I'm interested in your also the violence of our rituals, so the moral of our rituals. So animals have violence, but they are not conscious of their violence. We are conscious, terrible. So I really suggest to read your book.
A quick remark. Consider that when we say that there is a role of semiosis in building rituals, in semiosis doesn't involve only language, syntactic language, but also icons and other kinds of signs. You know, also from the Persian point of view, also emotions are signs. And so from this point of view, semiotization can include also animals that not necessarily use a syntactic language. They do not have a syntactic language. But of course, it is difficult to imagine to build a ritual like a Catholic Mass without the role of a syntactic language. It is a complicated ritual, okay?